In 2026, the greatest competition you will face is not against technology, markets, or other people. It is against the unexamined parts of your own mind. While the world accelerates, fragments attention, and rewards constant reaction, most people will live externally, moved by trends, fears, and impulses they do not understand. To stay ahead, you must do the opposite. You must turn inward. Most people believe progress comes from acquiring more skills, more information, more validation. Yet the unseen truth is that the mind overloaded with noise becomes predictable, and what is predictable is easily replaced. The individual who understands their inner world, however, becomes irreplaceable. Your thoughts are not neutral. They are shaped by unconscious patterns formed long before you became aware of them. Old fears, unmet needs, inherited beliefs. If these patterns remain unconscious, they will quietly control your decisions while convincing you that you are free. Mastery begins the moment you recognize this illusion. In 2026, emotional intelligence will outweigh raw intelligence. The person who can sit with discomfort without fleeing, who can think clearly while others panic, who can delay impulse in a culture addicted to instant gratification. This person will move strategically while others move reflexively. Calm will become a competitive advantage, but mastery of the mind does not mean suppression. What you resist does not disappear, it waits. The parts of yourself you deny, your anger, insecurity, ambition, vulnerability, do not vanish. They operate in the background, distorting your relationships and sabotaging your potential. True strength comes from integration, not perfection. When you understand your inner contradictions, you stop projecting them onto the world. You stop blaming circumstances, people, or systems for what you have not yet faced within yourself. This creates clarity, and clarity creates power. While others seek motivation, you cultivate awareness. While others chase confidence, you build self-knowledge. While others imitate success, you define meaning. This is why you move ahead, not faster but deeper. The future does not belong to the loudest voices or the most reactive minds. It belongs to those who have done the quiet inner work, those who have confronted themselves honestly and emerged with direction. Master your mind, and you will not merely survive 2026. You will shape it. Most people wake each day believing that their struggle is against the world outside them. They see competitors, systems, circumstances, and unfair advantages as the forces holding them back. Yet this belief itself is the quiet trap. The real competition has always been internal, unfolding invisibly within the mind long before any external challenge appears. What you face in the world is often only the reflection of conflicts you have not yet resolved within yourself. Inside every person lives a complex landscape of habits, fears, desires, and assumptions formed through years of experience. These patterns operate automatically, guiding decisions while remaining largely unseen. When they go unexamined, they create the illusion of choice while narrowing the range of what feels possible. A person may believe they are making rational decisions, yet those decisions are often reactions shaped by old emotional conditioning rather than conscious intent. This is how the internal world quietly dictates external outcomes. The greatest advantage another person can have over you is not intelligence, wealth, or opportunity, but self-awareness. When someone understands their inner motives, they no longer waste energy fighting shadows. They recognize when fear is speaking instead of reason, when ego is disguising itself as ambition, when avoidance is pretending to be patience. This awareness weakens the hidden forces that sabotage progress. Without it, a person may work endlessly yet feel stuck, repeating the same cycles under different names. Many external rivalries are projections of internal insecurity. The need to prove worth, to dominate, or to seek validation often arises from unresolved self-doubt. When this doubt remains unconscious, it drives comparison, jealousy, and resentment. Energy that could be used for creation is spent on reaction. The mind becomes preoccupied with measuring itself against others, rather than refining its own direction. In such a state, even success feels fragile, because it depends on external approval rather than inner stability. Internal competition is also a struggle between comfort and growth. The mind seeks familiarity, even when familiarity is limiting. Old identities feel safe because they are known, yet they quietly restrict evolution. To outgrow them requires facing uncertainty, discomfort, and the fear of losing a familiar sense of self. Most people retreat at this point, not because they lack ability, but because they have not learned to sit with inner tension without escaping it. Those who can remain present in discomfort gain access to new levels of clarity and strength. When the inner world becomes conscious, external challenges lose much of their power. Obstacles are no longer interpreted as personal attacks or signs of inadequacy, but as information. Failure becomes feedback instead of identity. Other people's success stops feeling threatening because it no longer defines your worth. In this state, focus sharpens. Energy stops leaking through emotional reactions and becomes available for deliberate action. To master the internal competition is not to eliminate struggle, but to understand it. The mind becomes an ally rather than an adversary. And once this shift occurs, the external world begins to respond differently, not because it has changed, but because you have. An overloaded mind may appear busy, informed, and productive, but beneath the surface it becomes remarkably predictable. When attention is constantly pulled in multiple directions, the mind loses its capacity for depth and begins to rely on shortcuts. It reacts instead of choosing, consumes instead of creating, and repeats familiar patterns because there is no space left for reflection. What feels like stimulation is often quiet exhaustion, disguised as movement. When the mind is flooded with information, it cannot properly distinguish what is essential from what is merely urgent. Every notification feels important, every opinion demands consideration, every trend creates pressure to respond. In this state, thought becomes shallow. Decisions are shaped by what is loudest or most recent rather than what is meaningful. Over time, this trains the mind to follow predictable pathways, responding to external triggers with almost mechanical consistency. Predictability emerges because overload weakens awareness. When mental energy is scattered, the unconscious takes control. Old habits, biases, and emotional reflexes step in to manage the excess. These patterns are efficient but not intelligent. They repeat what has worked before, even when it no longer serves growth. This is why overstimulated minds often cling to familiar beliefs, routines, and identities. Novelty feels threatening, not because it is dangerous, but because the mind lacks the clarity to engage with it consciously. In a culture that rewards constant input, overload is often mistaken for intelligence. Yet true intelligence requires space. Without silence, the mind cannot integrate experience. Without pauses, insights cannot form. The mind becomes a mirror of the environment rather than a force that shapes it. This is why those who consume endlessly often sound alike, think alike, and react alike. Their thoughts are not truly their own, they are echoes. Predictable minds are easily influenced. Marketing, fear-based narratives, and social pressure work best on those who are mentally fatigued. When cognitive resources are depleted, critical thinking declines. Emotional appeals bypass reason, and simple explanations replace complex understanding. The individual feels informed, yet is subtly guided, nudged, and managed by forces they believe they are choosing freely. Overload also creates emotional volatility. When the mind cannot rest, emotions accumulate without being processed. Small frustrations trigger disproportionate reactions. Anxiety becomes a constant background noise. In this state, people seek relief through distraction, which only adds to the overload. The cycle reinforces itself, narrowing perception and reducing inner freedom. Those who reduce mental noise gain a rare advantage. By choosing fewer inputs, they reclaim attention. By slowing down, they regain depth. With clarity comes unpredictability, not in behavior, but in thought. They are no longer driven by the latest stimulus, nor trapped by habitual reactions. Their responses carry intention rather than impulse. An overloaded mind follows the path of least resistance, and that path is always familiar. When the mind is given space, however, it begins to see alternatives. It becomes capable of original thought, subtle perception, and deliberate action. In a world saturated with noise, this inner spaciousness is what separates those who are easily anticipated from those who quietly lead. Emotional regulation has become a form of intelligence more valuable than raw knowledge or technical skill. In a world defined by speed, uncertainty, and constant stimulation, the ability to manage inner states determines the quality of decisions, relationships, and long-term outcomes. Those who cannot regulate their emotions may appear capable on the surface, yet their actions are often dictated by fear, impulse, or the need for immediate relief rather than clarity. When emotions remain unregulated, they quietly hijack perception. A stressed mind interprets neutral events as threats. An insecure mind reads disagreement as rejection. An anxious mind rushes to conclusions before understanding the situation fully. These distortions feel real in the moment, which is why emotional reactions often appear justified. yet they narrow awareness, making intelligent action almost impossible. What looks like poor judgment is often unrecognized emotional turbulence, shaping thought from behind the scenes. In professional environments, emotional regulation separates those who rise from those who stall. Pressure exposes inner structure. Some people become reactive, defensive, or withdrawn when challenged, while others remain composed and responsive. The difference is not talent, but inner stability. A regulated individual can listen without immediately protecting their ego, adapt without panic, and respond to conflict without escalating it. This ability builds trust and authority far more reliably than dominance or charisma. Emotionally unregulated people are also easier to manipulate. When fear, anger, or validation seeking is activated, reasoning weakens. Decisions are made to soothe discomfort rather than serve long-term interest. This is why emotional intelligence is not merely interpersonal, it is strategic. The person who can remain calm when others are agitated gains informational advantage. They see patterns others miss because their perception is not clouded by emotional urgency. Regulation does not mean suppression. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They accumulate and express themselves indirectly through exhaustion, resentment, or sudden outbursts. True regulation begins with awareness. By recognizing emotional signals without immediately acting on them, the individual creates space between feeling and behavior. In that space lies choice. Over time, this practice strengthens the nervous system's capacity to tolerate intensity without losing clarity. In relationships, emotional regulation transforms connection. It allows for honesty without cruelty and vulnerability without collapse. Instead of reacting to perceived threats, a regulated person can remain present, curious, and grounded. This creates emotional safety, which deepens trust and reduces unnecessary conflict. Many relational struggles are not caused by incompatibility, but by unmanaged emotional reactions, repeatedly triggering old wounds. As automation replaces many technical skills, what remains uniquely human is the capacity to self-regulate. Machines process data efficiently, but they do not experience fear, envy, or shame. Humans do. Those who learn to navigate these inner forces gain an edge that cannot be automated. They become resilient in uncertainty and effective in complexity. In an era where everyone has access to information, the true advantage lies in inner mastery. Emotional regulation sharpens thinking, stabilizes identity, and preserves energy. It allows intelligence to be applied consistently rather than occasionally. And in a world that constantly provokes reaction, the person who can remain inwardly steady moves with a quiet, decisive power. What you suppress does not disappear, it simply moves out of sight. The mind has a remarkable ability to hide what feels uncomfortable, unacceptable, or threatening, but what is hidden does not lose its influence. Instead, it begins to operate indirectly, shaping behavior, emotions, and choices without being recognized as their source. In this way, suppression creates the illusion of control, while quietly handing power to the very forces one is trying to avoid. Suppressed emotions often return, disguised as reactions that seem unrelated to their origin. Unacknowledged anger may surface as irritation over trivial matters. Repressed fear may appear as chronic anxiety or rigid control. Denied vulnerability can transform into emotional distance or sudden defensiveness. Because the original feeling was never consciously faced, its expression feels mysterious, even irrational. The individual reacts without understanding why, reinforcing the sense that circumstances or other people are to blame. The mind suppresses in the name of survival. Early experiences teach what is acceptable and what is not. Certain emotions may have once threatened belonging, safety, or love, so they were pushed away. Over time, this avoidance becomes automatic. Yet the psyche seeks wholeness. What is rejected internally demands recognition, and when it cannot be expressed consciously, it finds expression unconsciously. This is why patterns repeat despite strong intentions to change. Suppression also distorts perception. Traits that are denied within are often noticed and judged harshly in others. A person who suppresses their own ambition may resent success in others. One who denies their own vulnerability may view emotional expression as weakness. These projections feel like accurate observations, but they are reflections of unresolved inner material. The world becomes a mirror, constantly triggering what has not been integrated. Control achieved through suppression is fragile. It requires constant effort, vigilance, and distraction. When life slows down or stress increases, the suppressed material breaks through with greater intensity. Burnout, emotional collapse, or sudden life crises often emerge not from weakness, but from prolonged inner division. The more something is pushed away, the more forcefully it returns. True strength does not come from elimination of unwanted parts, but from conscious relationship with them. When suppressed emotions are acknowledged without judgment, their energy changes. Anger becomes clarity and boundary. Fear becomes discernment. Vulnerability becomes connection. The same forces that once sabotaged behavior begin to inform it intelligently. Integration restores choice. Facing what has been suppressed is uncomfortable because it challenges the identity built around avoidance. Yet this discomfort is temporary, while the cost of suppression is ongoing. Awareness loosens the grip of unconscious patterns. What is seen clearly no longer needs to act covertly. The individual regains authorship over their actions instead of being driven by unseen impulses. When inner fragmentation gives way to acceptance, behavior becomes more consistent and grounded. Emotional reactions lose their compulsive charge. Relationships become less reactive and more honest. The energy once spent on suppression becomes available for creativity, focus, and growth. What was feared as weakness reveals itself as a source of resilience. What you suppress controls you only as long as it remains hidden. Once brought into awareness, it becomes part of your strength rather than the force that undermines it. Clarity does not arrive through blame, comparison, or waiting for circumstances to change. It emerges when an individual accepts full responsibility for their inner and outer life. Self-responsibility is not about self-criticism or harsh judgment. It is about recognizing authorship. The moment you understand that your perceptions, reactions, and choices are yours to examine, confusion begins to dissolve. When responsibility is avoided, the mind searches outward for causes. Other people, systems, timing, and fate become convenient explanations for inner discomfort. While these factors influence experience, they do not determine meaning or response. Blame fragments attention. It keeps the mind occupied with narratives of injustice rather than engaged in understanding. As long as energy is directed toward what should be different externally, clarity remains inaccessible. Taking responsibility brings attention back to where real influence exists. Instead of asking why something happened, the question shifts to how it is being interpreted and responded to. This shift is subtle yet powerful. It restores agency. The individual stops feeling like a passive participant in life and begins to recognize the role they play in shaping outcomes through perception, boundary setting, and choice. Many people confuse responsibility with guilt. In reality, responsibility is freeing. Guilt anchors attention in the past, while responsibility anchors it in the present. It acknowledges what is without becoming trapped in self-condemnation. Through this lens, mistakes are no longer evidence of inadequacy, but sources of information. Each experience becomes feedback rather than a verdict on identity. Self-responsibility also clarifies relationships. When reactions are owned rather than projected, communication becomes more honest. Instead of accusing others of causing emotions, the individual acknowledges their own triggers and needs. This reduces conflict and increases mutual respect. It also prevents emotional dependency, as inner stability no longer relies on external validation or control. Clarity deepens when responsibility extends to inner states. Thoughts are recognized as mental events rather than absolute truths. Emotions are felt without being acted out impulsively. Patterns are observed instead of denied. This level of awareness dissolves confusion because it reveals the mechanisms behind behavior. What once felt chaotic becomes understandable. Understanding replaces reactivity. Without self-responsibility, insight remains theoretical. One may intellectually grasp concepts of growth, yet continue repeating the same cycles. Responsibility transforms insight into action. It bridges awareness and behavior. The individual begins to make choices aligned with long-term values rather than short-term relief. Direction emerges naturally, not from external instruction, but from inner coherence. Clarity is not the absence of complexity. It is the ability to navigate complexity without distortion. Self-responsibility provides this capacity. It simplifies decision-making by removing excuses and emotional fog. When you stop outsourcing power to circumstances, focus sharpens. Attention returns to what can actually be influenced. As responsibility becomes a habit, life feels less overwhelming, not because challenges disappear, but because they are approached with grounded realism. The mind becomes steady, perception becomes accurate, and action becomes intentional. In this state, clarity is not something you search for. It is something that arises as a natural consequence of owning your inner world and the choices that flow from it. In 2026, speed will no longer be the advantage it once appeared to be. While the world continues to accelerate, producing faster tools, quicker outputs, and instant responses, the true differentiator will be depth. Speed creates movement, but depth creates direction. Without direction, movement only leads to exhaustion, repetition, and shallow results that quickly lose relevance. Speed favors reaction. It rewards those who respond first, not those who understand most clearly. In fast environments, decisions are often made before meaning is fully grasped. This creates a culture of constant correction. People rush forward, then spend time repairing consequences they did not anticipate. Depth, by contrast, slows perception enough to see underlying patterns. It allows insight to form before action, reducing waste and increasing precision. As automation and artificial intelligence continue to handle rapid execution, human value shifts elsewhere. Machines excel at speed, optimization, and repetition. They process data faster than any individual ever could. Competing on speed alone becomes futile. Depth, contextual understanding, ethical judgment, emotional insight, and symbolic meaning remains distinctly human. Those who cultivate depth will guide systems rather than be driven by them. Depth also builds resilience. Fast progress without depth is brittle. It relies on favorable conditions and collapses under pressure. When challenges arise, those who moved quickly without understanding struggle to adapt. Depth creates inner structure. It anchors identity and purpose, allowing individuals to remain steady amid uncertainty. They do not need constant validation or momentum to continue. Their direction is internally grounded. In learning, depth outperforms speed by creating lasting competence. Rapid consumption of information creates familiarity, not mastery. Concepts skimmed are easily forgotten and rarely integrated. Depth requires patience, repetition, and reflection. It transforms knowledge into understanding. Those who learn deeply can apply insight across changing contexts, while those who learn quickly often depend on specific conditions to succeed. Depth also reshapes influence. Fast voices are loud, but short-lived. Deep voices are quieter, yet enduring. People instinctively trust those who speak from understanding rather than urgency. In leadership, depth communicates stability. In creativity, it produces originality rather than imitation. In strategy, it anticipates consequences beyond the immediate moment. The pursuit of speed often fragments attention. Multitasking becomes a badge of honor, yet it dilutes presence. Depth demands focus. It asks for sustained attention on fewer things, which feels uncomfortable in a culture trained for distraction. Yet this discomfort is precisely what separates those who lead from those who follow trends. Focused attention reveals nuances others miss. In 2026, those who slow down internally will move further externally. Depth allows you to choose when speed is necessary and when it is harmful. It prevents unnecessary acceleration and preserves energy for moments that truly matter. Rather than reacting to every signal, you act from understanding. While speed may create visibility, depth creates significance. One fades quickly, the other compounds over time. In a world obsessed with immediacy, those who cultivate depth will quietly outperform, not by doing more faster, but by doing what matters most with clarity, intention, and lasting impact. So, as the world races forward, remember this. The future will not be claimed by those who move the fastest, but by those who move with awareness. When you master your inner world, noise loses its power over you. When you take responsibility for what lives within you, clarity replaces confusion. When you face what you once suppressed, strength replaces inner conflict. And when you choose depth over haste, your actions begin to carry weight and meaning. The years ahead will reward those who can remain steady while others scatter, thoughtful while others react, and grounded while others chase appearances. This is not a loud path, nor an easy one, but it is a lasting one. Master your mind, and you will no longer be trying to keep up with the future. You will be shaping it from the inside out.